Welcome back to the N-Scale Cheapskate. I'm the N-Scale Cheapskate, and I hate building model railroad benchwork. This is kind of a problem since it's literally the foundation of any model railroad. Maybe it's that it's just not at all creative and has nothing to do with the trains themselves. Maybe it's that I just don't enjoy carpentry, which benchwork always, it seems, consists of. And if you take a look at any of the benchwork I've built, you will see wobbly legs, split boards, and just really poor workmanship because I'm not very good at carpentry. But for this project layout, I need some kind of benchwork. So I set a goal for myself. Can I come up with some benchwork that doesn't involve a single screw, or at least doesn't involve connecting two boards by a screw? And no, I'm not going to find some loophole by connecting three boards with a screw. And I think the answer is yes. Thanks to the magic of 3D printing, I've come up with an idea of a way I can have benchwork, including a wood base on the bottom of the foam board, without having to screw any pieces of wood together, split any boards, make anything crooked. But I'll go over that unique design later in the video. First of all, we just need some supplies to get started with this benchwork. This is the first segment of our project layout. And I don't actually know which segment it is we're going to be building because I'm recording this well ahead of time. So that's great. I'm sure future me will tell you all about that later in the video. But for now, let's go to past me and find out about choosing our wood and getting that part assembled. Thanks, future me, for that great introduction. I'm present me. Future me will talk about the 3D printing. I'm present me giving the oh, you know what, never mind. Just go ahead with the wood. I'm not even sure which segment this is going to become. But I did go down to Lowe's and I got the first piece of wood we'll need for the benchwork for this project. This was a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of plywood. I believe the sticker says, yes, 2 foot by 2 foot Luan plywood. I don't know, I'm not a carpenter. And if you go someplace like Lowe's to get it, they will be kind enough to make the first 2 cuts for free. So they cut it down to this 15 by 15 inch segment for me. Now, 1/4 inch plywood has a little bit of give to it. If I try to bend it, if I were to accidentally put my weight on it while it was supported, it could snap. But I wanted to save the few bucks from going to 1/2 inch plywood. So my plan is to use this 15 by 15 inch square and use the scrap pieces that they cut off. I believe this is the 15 inch piece. I'm going to cut this into 2 4-inch strips. You can see my marking lines here. We're going to saw those and put those on the 2 sides of this square to give it some stiffness in that direction. And then I'm going to use the other scrap board to cut a couple pieces to go between those to give me stiffness in the other direction. So that way we can make our 1/4 inch plywood into something stiffer. Without having to pay the extra few bucks to go to 1/2 inch. This whole board cost, I believe, $7.36. So really big spending. All right, so let's head downstairs now and cut this. No, wait, let's not cut this one. Let's head downstairs now and cut these pieces of wood into what we need. Now for this one, it's just 2 long cuts, which I believe they would be called rip cuts if I'd done them with the grain, but that's just not how this one is. So cross cut, I guess. And I have a kind of miniature table saw, I think it's called a floor saw, that I'm going to use for that. If you don't have a floor saw like that, that's perfectly fine. A handheld jigsaw would do the job, or even if you just wanted to clamp this to a surface and use a hand saw, that would work. We're not going to go for precision here. The edge that was cut professionally is the edge that I'm going to put up against this board here. And I'm going to, if you don't have a saw that can cut a really straight edge, then I might recommend making your scrap piece be in the middle, unlike what I've done, so that you make sure you have a professionally cut edge to go along both sides, or each side of your square. I think for this piece, I'm going to have to use my jigsaw to cut along these lines, since there are 3 cuts to do. I could do it doing with a circular saw. I just tend to find the jigsaw a little easier, especially when precision doesn't matter. Again, you could do all of these just fine with a hand saw, just clamp it down to a surface and do that. That's perfectly fine. If I was truly cheapskating, that's what I would be doing. But, you know, if you have access to good tools, use them. These are not my tools. My mother loves carpentry and has a fairly well-stocked tool shop in the basement, and so she's kind enough to let me use her tools. If you have a friend or family member like that, maybe that'll be helpful for you in cheapskating your model railroad. If not, very simple hand tools will still do the job. Good stuff. There. Two boards have become 5, 4 of which we actually need. And we're back. So I have my scrap board here, which I'll put over with my other scrap wood. And we now have our 2 small pieces and our 2 long pieces. Hopefully they're not too long. Let's see. Did I do this right? Here's our segment. And let's move the camera to where you can actually see. Come, look over my shoulder. Well, I was going to do this at the desk, but you wouldn't be able to see things very well because it's kind of a mess. I'm migrating files from an old computer to a new one. So we'll use the colorful rug instead. You can see fairly clearly what's wood and what isn't. We have the square segment. We're going to put these 2 boards here and here. So that'll give us nice stiffness against bending in this dimension. And then clearly I measured something wrong, but that's okay. We'll do something like this, put these in the middle. It'll give it some stiffness in bending in this direction. Maybe if we do something like that, in fact. Oh, I know why I cut these wrong. I was envisioning doing that when I made the measurements. I changed my mind after I made the measurements. I thought I changed my mind before that. You see, I'm not hiding my mistakes from you. Well, we got a couple options here. Either we can get everything out and cut those pieces of wood as replacements. Oh yeah, we've got plenty of material here we can work with. Remember that saying, measure twice, cut once? Yeah, I didn't do that. Well, I guess I did measure twice. I just think twice, cut twice. Well, let's go try this again, I guess. More scrap wood. So I had an idea. Let's save some time on this. There we go. Now we've got a nice, solid looking setup. You can see there's some imperfection and gaps between here, but that's not enough to really make much of a difference. I think this will work pretty well. So what we need now is some glue to hold all this together and some really heavy stuff to make sure it bonds well. So I'm going to scoot things over and do this on the wood floor instead of the carpet to make sure we're just squishing the glue, not squishing the carpet. You know, when you try to minimize your use of paper towel and primarily use washcloths in your house, it makes it really hard to find paper towel when you need it for something. Thinly. I'm making this up as I go along since my glue container isn't working. Now, as I think I've said, if you prefer to do this a method more carpentry heavy for your bench work, you are welcome to do that. I'm just not very good at carpentry and I do not enjoy it, so I'm going for the screwing free method. Okay, that's in place. There we go. Now what if we used those couple pieces of mistake wood? Just realized we could put one of those in here and really make ourselves some more stiffness, and that's what we're going for here. So at this point, our 1/4 inch piece of plywood that we got is effectively going to be 1/2 inch, and we have a lot less wasted material, scrap left over. Okay, now let's clean up the mess we made. Okay, so now we just need to weigh this down to make sure we get a nice solid connection. So, we've managed to save $3 with a few cuts and a little glue. Of course, $3 may not sound like a lot, but if you multiply that by the 6 segments like this in the railroad plan, that comes to $18, and that's not shabby. You could buy a turnout for that. So let's weigh this down. We'll use the textbook that taught me about increasing stiffness of material, in this case, weight transfer. I'm sure you guys have absolutely no idea what I studied in school at this point. See, scrap wood can be useful. Or processing all my back issues of Model Railroader. Here, I actually recently stopped subscribing. Okay, let's let that dry. We've let the glue dry overnight, or more accurately, like 3 overnights and 2 days, because that's how life goes sometimes. So let's finally get this mess off my office floor and see how we did. Okay. I need to clean the floor. Should tilt this so you can see it. These feel like they're on very securely. This board feels as stiff as 1/2 inch. Nice. I don't know how well you can see it, but the edges are fairly smooth. I think we did a pretty good job, and not a single screw or nail. Okay, future cheapskate here. Now it's time to talk about the mysterious supports for these boards. You're probably wondering how we're going to do this without any screws at all. Well, I'll show you. So we drilled some 1/4 inch holes. Actually, before we get to that, let's talk about this program I'm using. So this 3D modeling software is called Onshape. I'd say it's a fairly easy and straightforward parametric modeling tool. There are various CAD modeling programs available for free. I'll let you do some research on your own to figure out which one you want to use. The ones I have experience with are SketchUp, which I think it's now fully web-based. This is the logo. I still have the very old version that's not web-based. The web-based version isn't as good as the older non-web-based version, but it still works reasonably well. I'd say the free version of that is a pretty good place to get started. I taught myself 3D modeling using it, so it's a very intuitive way if you've never done 3D modeling before. Onshape I really like. I don't know if there's a free version of it. I have access through an education license through a science and tech nonprofit that I volunteer with. So I don't know whether there's a free version of it, or if not, how much the not free version is. Like I said, figuring out which software you want to use for 3D modeling is a different issue. Maybe I'll have a video on it at some point, but that's not the subject for this video. But we're going to walk through designing the supports of the wooden base plate for the layout segment. So we started by drilling those 1/4 inch holes in the board. Okay, so make that a 1/4 inch. And let's see, the thickness of that should be, well, it's 2 sheets of 1/4 inch plywood, so obviously it's a 1/2 inch. No, that's not how carpentry works, of course not. Well, I have my calipers here. Let's not catch them on the layout wiring, and let's see how thick this actually is. 0.375 inches. We'll go with 0.35, just to make sure we're not sticking up into the foam board at all. There's our peg. Now that peg will go into the board. How is this going to attach two segments together? You'll see. Hopefully it works, or else I'm going to look pretty silly. But we won't find that out until I have more than one segment. If not, though, there's always the option of redesigning. For most things, it takes a few redesigns to get a design that's really good, so if that's a thing that needs to happen, we will do it. So we'll say this is where the edge of that board is, so that hole is 1 inch from the corner, like we designed it to be. So we have a 2 inch by 2 inch area supporting the board at the corner. That should be a lot more than enough. Let's just go ahead and make this the full height that we need, which is 3 3/8 inches, more or less. There's a bit of room for adjustment in the N-track module this will connect to eventually. 3/8 is 0.375, so 3.375 inches long. Now we have an extremely awkward looking support. Now I'm not going to 3D print it just as this giant block. That would be kind of silly. So what I'm going to try to do is bring it down to a probably, do I want to do 1/2 inch or 1 inch? Let's make it a 1 inch by 1 inch support. So we'll just draw a few more lines here. We may end up fast forwarding this. After all, this is not a CAD tutorial. This is a model railroading video. How to do model railroading inexpensively, not how to use CAD software. Okay, so now we have, as you can see, it slopes out to get that 2 inch by 2 inch support at the top. We also have that kind of as a foot at the bottom. But it's nice and still square on this edge. So this is the area where we'll have another one. Now I think I'm going to make some cutouts in this area just to save on material, make it a little stronger, because at the moment this looks solid, that looks pretty strong, but the way it will print is solid walls with some interior walls for a bit of extra strength, and I'd rather have it be more of a truss structure. So let's do a bit of that. Okay, there we go. Now we've got kind of a truss structure here. So I think this is going to end up being stronger since we'll have actually more material in this probably than with the way it would have printed it before. Okay, here we are with the slicing software. I'll pull in that model we just made and then get it ready for the 3D printer. So here's one, and this is probably a good opportunity to show you how they connect also, at least how I'm envisioning that connection. We add an instance, we'll put it here. I'll just rotate it. So let's say we have one of these supporting corners of two different segments here. We'll just bring them in side by side, and then I'll have a clip that can go around and clamp them together. That's the idea, at least. But we don't have to design that clip until we actually have two segments. So that's a project for later. That'll be in a different video. So let's just get rid of this second one. We're just going to print one as a test this time, though obviously we will need 4 to support the segment. This doesn't have high detail, so we'll use the lowest level of detail, and we'll go ahead and tell it to slice. Boom. Looks like we have awfully thick infill here. That is probably more than we need. It's not like this model railroad segment is going to be all that heavy. Let's cut it down to 10%. Like I said, I was going through this very quickly with very little explanation. This is a model railroading video, not a 3D printing tutorial. If you want me to dive into some of the 3D modeling and 3D printing aspects in more detail, then let me know in the comments below, and I can certainly try to make a video about that too. So it looks like it'll take just over 2 hours to print it for a grand total of $1.25. Let's export the file and be ready to print. Okay, so here's my first iteration. As you can see, the slope came out a bit messy here, and these were awfully thick. It was a lot beefier than it needed to be. So I did a bit of a redesign and came up with this. As you can see, I made the slope a little more gentle to clear that issue up. I made the struts a little thinner. It's still plenty strong. And yes, these holes I made for 1/4-inch screws in case I decided at some point I wanted to do a bolt instead of a clip, just future-proofing for potential design changes. So yeah, we have 4 of them now. Let's assemble this thing. Okay, let's assemble this. Moment of truth. I did not assemble this before starting the video, so you're finding out if this works, and if we did this right along with me. I like this so far. It's a nice firm fit. Yeah, I like this. There's no support in the middle, but I mean, I could probably break it if I tried to, but I mean, that's true of any model railroad bench work. And realistically, the scenery, if I'm putting force on this, the scenery is going to break long before the board does. Bench work is complete without a single screw. Oh wait, I put these on backwards. As I was saying, the bench work is complete without a single screw. I just realized I forgot to give you a breakdown of the costs. And I promised in the intro video that I would do that, so here we go. So here are the costs for this segment so far, the costs of the bench work. The most expensive thing was the... Let me explain the columns first. This is the cost of all the items. For example, if I have to buy one large piece of wood and I only use a piece of it, this would be the cost of the entire piece of wood, and the second column is just the cost of the amount we used. I think this is the important column, because realistically the rest of that piece of wood, or that, in this case, that spool of 3D printer filament, is going to get used for other things. That's going to appear in the used material cost later on for some other project. It's not really part of the cost for this project. So our one segment of benchwork cost us less than $14. $7.36 for the plywood. The wood glue, we used a very small amount of that. I don't even know how much that cost. We've had it a long time. I'm counting that as negligible. If you want to count it for something, maybe round up and say this was $14. And then our prototype 3D print was $1.25. We made our modifications and printed the 4 final ones. That gives us $5.24. So our total is at less than $14. Now I would say that's a pretty good deal. If you've got any comments or questions about this design or other things we could have tried, or your methods for bench work, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Next time, I think we'll actually get started putting some foam board on here and scenery and track. This thing needs some trains on it now. And by then, we'll probably know which segment this is turning into. That'll be fun. Thanks for watching. You know what button to hit if you want to see more videos like this. Till next time, have fun with your trains, and God bless. Hey, I'm bored. Me too. I would make a pun like that. And I can't get the glue open. Pliers. No, don't open like that. Just open the way you're designed to. Am I missing something? Spread it thinly. We can do that. Especially if it only comes out like that.